Welcome back to Restless. I'm Father Joseph Gill, priest of the Diocese of Bridgeport, and we're very blessed to have the shepherd of the Diocese of Bridgeport, Bishop Frank Caggiano, on with us today, along with Diane, Lauren, and Paul. It takes a great deal to get all three of them on one episode these days, so I'm glad it worked out. But if you have had a chance to listen to the first episode that we had with Bishop Caggiano, he told us quite a bit about his life, some really very interesting stories about meeting the popes, traveling all throughout the world to the Holy Land, and kind of his insights into the church today. We'd love now to kind of talk about living as a young adult Catholic in the midst of today's world, dating, going to work, friendships, like all this stuff that we try to balance, and our Catholic faith. And what advice do you have for young adult Catholics? I mean, we're all in our 30s. I'm in my 30s for 6 more days.
Not when this is aired.
5 more days, yeah.
Well, I'm way past 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, right?
That's fair.
What advice do I give?
Yeah, what would you, particularly, in one of the things you mentioned in our last episode was the necessity of finding good friends. And let me just ask you guys, Lauren and Diane and Paul, how would you rate the young adult community that you have? Do you think you have, is it solid? Has it been helpful to you? What have you been involved in? I know like Paul was head of C4C, Crossroads for Christ, for a while.
Just the Stanford chapter, not the whole organization. No, that's too much. They wouldn't let me do that.
No. But what are some of the challenges that you face in living out your Catholic faith?
Yeah, so I lived in Stanford 10 years, and I think the young adult community has been very effective here in Stanford, but it's gone in cycles. It comes and it goes, and it has peaks and troughs because it's essentially a young adult ministry is always dealing with a transient population. Either they leave, people graduate and are no longer young adults, or they literally move away from the diocese and go somewhere else. And so you have this ebbs and flows, but it seems like in general it's been growing, which has been good. But I think it's just in terms of if you're in young adult ministry, it's more persistence and really finding what works for the community. Mm-hmm. And I think whatever we're doing in Stanford now seems to be working because it's going very well and have lots of friends. I think that was the original question.
Yeah. Now, Bishop, I know you have put a real primacy on young adult ministry in the diocese. Do you see that as perhaps the most important demographic to hit at this point, or?
That's an interesting question. I wouldn't say the most important, but it is an urgent need. Because to prioritize one over the other is really kind of like taking your family and saying this child is more important than that one. But we all love each other, and I love them all. I would think, to go back to your original question about what advice would I give, I think the very first thing I would say to young adults is don't be afraid to ask questions, and don't be afraid to look for the answers. Don't take anything at face value, particularly what the secular world is saying. Ask some really hard questions. Ask them of the church and the faith too. And then don't be afraid to seek the venues where you could find some of the answers. All right. The number one reason young adults disaffiliate from the church, there's actually 2 predominant reasons. Number 1 is that their questions are not answered in faith. Number 2, the hypocrisy of Christians, which has now risen to the number 1 factor why young adults leave the church. That they don't see Christians living what they claim. And unfortunately, there's enough blame to go around for everybody in the church and everybody in all the Christian churches that we say one thing, we do another. We say we claim the sovereignty of Jesus, and then in our politics, economics, and our friendships and relations, we don't act as if he's the sovereign Lord of my life. So the first is ask the questions, right? And I think in the end, the second one is find people who will support you, right? Because spending time with hypocrisy is only going to weaken the desire to go forward. They have to be challenged to authenticity too, but you can't do all of that at once and find your way, I think. So
I've always struggled with that reason about leaving the church because of hypocrisy, because I guess to me, the church is not a collection, as Pope Francis says, the church is not a hotel for saints, but a hospital for sinners.
Right.
And even church leaders are sinners. And I feigned to meet Christ one day and find out how many people I perhaps have scandalized by an imprudent joke or by, snapping at someone or whatever. And I hope people can recognize that, okay, even if he's a church leader, he's striving for holiness, but not there yet.
So let's take that. Let's go a little bit deeper then, because I think you're absolutely correct. But if you understand the church primarily as an institution, then you hold the members of that institution no differently than other institutions. So we've been disappointed in politics. We've been disappointed in business. We've been disappointed in education and universities, and so many others, that people will say one thing and do the other. So if a person doesn't have a relationship with the Lord, then they kind of look at the church like any other institution and say, well, you people say one thing and do another, because they haven't had the encounter yet that helps them to realize we're not like every other institution.
Yeah.
We're not.
Right. We got the divine mandate.
Yeah, we're a living reality. We're the mystical body, which means we're sisters and brothers, period. Right? So until that happens, but then when it happens, then the hypocrisy is not as much an issue. But from the outside in, it is.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Oh, sure. What are your thoughts on that? Because, you probably have known a lot of your peers to leave the church. Do you see these two reasons being factors?
Definitely. I think that most people are really quick to judge. So it's easy to look at someone that's living a life of faith or claiming that they are, and then judge them when you see them doing something against the faith, right? Or something that doesn't seem right. And I think the devil has got to be working in that, right? Oh, look at her. She's not really living the faith. Why do you want to do that? You can't trust them, right? So the devil, he'll latch onto that right away. And I don't know. People probably lack true courage to just keep going forward. If something gets hard, or they just leave. It's just easier to leave. Why bother?
Yeah.
I think that's a bigger one. I think it's indifference. I think that's probably the biggest one. They're not even thinking as far ahead as hypocrisy. They're just, I don't want to be bothered with it.
Right.
Or they don't even get to that point. It's not even a thought.
Or it could be, my life is comfortable.
Yeah.
Not going to Mass on Sunday, not getting up anymore because my mom and dad aren't making me. Why do I need that for?
I was kind of thinking the other day about heated seats, because I don't have.
I know.
I do have them, Father Joseph.
I just got a new car on Saturday, by the way.
You just got a new car.
Wow.
It's a used car, but
Congrats to you.
Yeah.
Heated seats?
It's heated. Here's
Explain
why.
this now. Yeah, this I want to hear.
We've heard the heated seat thing a number of times, so we'll hear it again.
Have I?
Yeah.
Not on.
Go on.
Yes.
Go on.
Go on.
Really?
Yep. Go
Okay,
on.
I'll use a different analogy clearly for Paul. And I hate to bore Paul. It's the worst thing. No, but like heated seats is a nice add-on, but it's not mandatory, But an engine is mandatory, right? You can't have a car without an engine, but you can have a car without heated seats. And so in the same way, I think a lot of people think that faith is an add-on to life, because if your life is running pretty smoothly without faith, why do you need faith, right? And 300 years ago, like sickness and death were right around the door. You could lose everything in a fortnight. And so there was kind of a much more like a crisis situation of like, life's really miserable, but faith offers me the hope of life is not going to be miserable someday.
So let's go one step further. The truth is, there is not a single human being who lives life without faith.
That's true.
It's not a question of not having faith. It's a question of who do you have faith in.
Yeah.
All right. And then when the real crisis comes, you realize faith in yourself as being the master of truth and value doesn't work.
Sure.
I think it is, a crisis of identity. And Bishop Barron talks about like the ego drama versus the theo drama, and everyone, secular society is kind of living in the ego drama of self-definition. And that's the storyline that society is selling, that I am whoever I want to be and I can self-define. It goes back to Genesis, and, it's like, I'm a God, so I'm going to, live my life the way that I want to. I think to Lauren's point, people are comfortable and, like they may blame the church, talk about hypocrisy, but at the end of the day, I think it's a lot of people know that the church, the gospel requires, it's all about self-gift and sacrifice. And if you're not willing to make that sacrifice because you're living, you're comfortable, you want like pleasure, power, honor, whatever it is, you're just never going to, if you're not open to the truth and open to that transformation, then
absolutely.
Yeah. But I think there is hope, because, if you live in a way that is not in accordance with the gospel message, you're perpetually unhappy. And there are a lot of distractions today, which I think it does make it harder to to feel that emptiness because you're bouncing from one thing to another, and it's just much more. There's many more things to distract yourself with today than there were in the past. But, I think a lot of people have found the faith. I mean, through my RCIA, like the stories have been, I've just been unhappy. I don't believe the narrative that society is selling, especially about all this like gender stuff now. And, you can identify as a cat, like all of these things. It's just gone. I think that's why we see a lot of people coming back to church, back to the faith. And
it's the only rock amidst the shifting sands of liquid modernity.
Yeah, and they don't know the story. They don't know the story. They think they know the story, and then but if people are open to truth and open to listening, my experience has been they are receptive to what the church has to teach. It may take obviously it takes courage and sacrifice to change your life and transform, but that's that's also why we have the grace and sacraments.
I think that's very well said. And the other advice I would give to everyone, not just young adults, but particularly young adults, is don't fall into the trap of false choices. And the history of the church is riddled with false choices and half-truths. Heresies are half-truths. They make somewhat sense, but it's not the fullness of the truth, as you're suggesting, right? Mm-hmm. So false choices would be, for example, I'll give you an example, to speak about hypocrisy and the sinfulness of the members. The church is the sinless bride of Christ made up of individual sinners. How can that be? So we're all sinners, but we form a sinless bride of Christ. Well, because there is not a false choice would say, well, then the church is just a sham, but it's not. Right? Because we say we want to live the truth. We're on the journey to live the truth, but we do that, right, in love, in charity, in mercy. You don't choose one over the other, you do both. And sometimes there's a tension between the two. So we could be hypocritical, but get up, we have failed, seek forgiveness, and strive again not to be hypocritical. So it's the truth and love going hand in hand, Ephesians 4.
Right.
To choose one over the other or one at exclusion of the other is not Catholic.
To be Catholic is to be both and.
Exactly.
Things that are both and.
Exactly. And in the world that you just described very well, you could be distracted for a while, but sooner or later, you come to the conclusion that this situation, everything I've lived around this situation, I have no answer for this situation. Mm-hmm. Then what do you do?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget, there was one young person I was working with who was, went through kind of a major conversion. And I asked him about it. I said, what changed? And he said, I felt like I've been living life half asleep and now I'm finally awake. I never forget that answer. It was like, because we do go through just the routine, like Lauren was kind of saying, the comfortable routine of everyday life and not really pondering the deeper questions of life. But when you actually wrestle with them.
Right. And I think, Paul, your observation about indifference is spot on, because I this was a while back, I once heard the definition of indifference is this: not caring enough to care.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not caring enough to care. So how do you get somebody to care? Because if you're indifferent, you could easily become indifferent about everything.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Right? And then how do you motivate to go beyond that? So you got a lot of people stuck, kind of gliding. But that also means that if somebody catches the fire, these other individuals can start catching the fire. In other words, what I'm really saying is there's a lot of straw out there that's dry.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
It will not take much, right, to get this bonfire going.
It's amazing. I just recently reread a biography of St. Francis that I love. And I've grown so much in appreciation for him in reading his biography, because he's so often portrayed as like a birdbath saint. But he's so much richer than that. And within his lifetime, his order grew to 6,000 members.
Yes.
His life, we're talking like 10 years. So clearly they were ready and they just needed that spark. And he was that spark because he was willing to live such a radically countercultural life that people asked questions. Is it possible? Is it like there was the hunger there? And at the time, that was when the big heresies that the Cathars and the Albigensians were coming about, when their answer to these deep questions was, let's leave the church, let's abandon her. And St. Francis said, no, let's reform from within by reforming ourselves, by becoming saints. And that's what drew 6,000 men to want to follow him.
It's funny you should say that. My swan song in World Youth Day with young adults. It was about ecological stewardship. I had 12 minutes.
Mm.
So I had 12 minutes. So to keep a bishop to 12 minutes is like miraculous, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, and none of you were there, I guess.
Which one?
The one where we talked about ecological stewardship.
Which year?
The one we just did, the last one.
Yeah, I was there.
Did you come to the talk? Oh, no, that was the second talk you came,
Yeah,
not the first.
Yeah, I came to the second talk.
All right, the first one. So I was supposed to listen. So I listened. This I do. So we listen about this and recycling and political action and blah, 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 all the rest of it. So there I am. I get up. Church is full. All these different countries. I said, now, my friends, these are all great ideas, but I have only one question to ask you. Just one, and we're done. What makes any or all of this Catholic, Christian? And they're all kind of looking at me. I said, that's the point. So that's the point. We haven't answered the real question yet. How is this a mandate of the gospel? So I said, do you want to be ecologically a good steward? If you want to get beyond what you see out there, I said, the answer to the question is, look yourself in the mirror. Because consumption needs consumers. The waste is generated by people buying things they don't need. So my question is, why do you think you have to wear the clothes you're wearing now to be lovable? Or wear the shoes that you're wearing to be lovable? Or the makeup that you have on to be lovable? Or the jewelry you have on to be lovable? Tell me, why do you need to do that? They're looking at me. I said, because God loves you with all your secrets, all your shadows. He knows them all, everything. And he still loves you. He loves you as you are and loves you too much to keep you the way you are. That's the charisma. That's the offer of salvation in Jesus Christ. So you want to save the world? Right? It starts with the offer that Christ gives us. Well, and that's it. Time's up. We're done. 12 minutes is over. We're done. But
I think that's one of the interesting lies that, because we're so interconnected in our world, it seems that a lot of young adults may think that they can't make a difference because they see these wars happening, these crimes, and this disaster, and then, climate change and this and that. And the thought is like, well, how can I make a change? And that's a lie to believe that one life cannot make a difference.
Oh, amen. Amen. A life could be transformative of many. But the truth is, what's within our power to change with grace is ourselves.
Exactly.
Totally.
So we could blame societies, the systems, all this, and all of that is true. But all of those are in service to people who allow that to continue. So if there was enough conversion of individual hearts, suddenly all this consumption would fall on deaf ears.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't fall on deaf ears. As the mounds of garbage grow bigger and bigger for shoes that are worn 3 times and thrown away, and clothes that are that are so skin tight that if you gain 22 ounces, you can't fit in them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I'm being loose.
Or
Yeah.
a little
those
facetious.
pants that are all cut up. I still can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah, why would you buy pants with holes in them? I don't understand. But that's me. I don't know.
Less material, the more cost. I don't get it,
But you see what? So there's young adults right now. If we can give them the tools, some will come along immediately. Some will come along in time. But the ability to be able to make change on a large scale has never been greater. It really is not.
So do you see that in your workplace and among your friend group? Do you see there's an openness?
At work,
Yeah.
I
Not
well,
so much, or?
actually, I work at one of the big 4 accounting firms, and we actually have inclusion networks for a lot of things. We do have a Christian inclusion network. So I started a national rosary, and I've been shocked at how many people are very interested in these sorts of questions of what is the purpose of my life? Why am I here? How do I serve the Lord through the workplace? I mean, there's, obviously there's people on both sides of the spectrum. I work with people who are you can tell that they're just unhappy, they're hurting, but they're not open to religion, they're not open to God, they're not open to that sort of healing. They're numbing themselves with all of these temporal things, and it's really sad to see, because you recognize the hurt, and you know that these things that they're going to in order to numb that pain are not going to make the situation better. I think it requires an openness.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So my company's a bit different. So my company's actually very culturally Catholic. And I'll explain why. So my company is headquartered in a Catholic canton in Switzerland. So Catholic cantons in Switzerland get Feast of St. Joseph off, they get the Annunciation off, they get the Ascension off, the Immaculate Conception, All Saints' Day, All Souls' Day. They get all the Catholic feast days as holidays in the Swiss canton. And it's amazing how nobody celebrates those holidays. They take them off. They're great. They're days off. We don't get them off in New York, but in Switzerland, they get them off. So and we have a lot of Catholics that actually work for the company just based on its location, and it being a lot of French people work there and Italians and everything, which is a very interesting thing. So I would say that generally my company is very family-oriented. Just in its orientation, most people have families and will sacrifice work for family. So it's a very interesting concept, but I wouldn't say it's particularly Christian other than that. But I think my team of 8 people, we have 5 Catholics, like in at least baptized likely, and then 3 non.
Right.
So very interesting.
Right.
I definitely see openness regularly in my daily life. Different people that I encounter, I can just sense it. Oh, this person's open. Like I work at Orange Theory. It's a gym around the corner from here, Bishop, which is why I'm in sweats, because I just came. This is the uniform there. But there's a coach, for instance. He's a new coach. It's group fitness, essentially. And he's new from Georgia and doesn't know anyone in Stanford. So I just kind of was peddling a little bit, do you have any friends yet? I ask that a lot, actually, people that are new. And they'll say, nope. I'm like, all right, time to make some, right? And
there you go.
That's simple.
I actually did move on to the faith. I always kind of tested out how open is this person being, right? Oh, I'm not a religious person, right? And then a couple of weeks later, someone that I know through St. Cecilia's, who's the daughter of the parish secretary, wonderful person, we were talking about Easter coming up at our parish, St. Cecilia's. And she said to him, like, without thinking about it, you should join us, at the Easter Vigil. The longest mass, right? For this guy that's not faithful. But it was so pure and genuine. And his response was great. He was like, oh, thank you. Like, he had a positive reaction. I was like, that's a good sign. So I don't know what will come next, right? But you can just see when people are receptive or they respond well, and who knows, God will lead it, right? But, I see it in my life, and then I just say prayers for people, offer them some Hail Marys and see where God will lead it. And then another thing I could say is that I recently did a retreat in Spain called Efeta, which means, Father Joseph,
Be opened.
Be opened. And this retreat is huge over there. They keep getting so many hundreds of young adults coming. We also have it in the United States. It apparently started here, and then it really caught on in Spain.
Is that with
I never heard of
that
it.
with
Me neither.
Yes.
I've never heard of it, Lauren.
Oh, yeah. So it's the young adult version of Amaze. That retreat.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah. So the whole theme
Why don't we
was
do it here?
exactly.
Oh, well, good. Then get going.
So
There we go.
I would say that one thing that's very hopeful to Lauren's point is that I think for a generation, especially the millennial generation, and then probably even more so with Gen Z, but it is changing, is that I think there was a whole period where we were told that we can't do something. We need help doing everything in life. Either we have a small problem, we'll help you, we'll accommodate you. I think that's actually changing. I think that they realize that that's terrible. Right? That you can't do something, which means you need the world, you need therapists, you need pills, you need this, you need the government, whatever. But it's actually that it's switching to you can actually do it. And I think that's giving people agency. And when you have agency, that means you can actually choose Christ, because we actually have that free will. We actually have that agency. And so I think the narrative is shifting a bit with the youngest generation. So it's like Gen Alpha, I think they call it. After
Is that
Gen
what they're
Z.
called
I
nowadays?
think so. They have no creativity.
Yeah. Then beta. Is it gamma? Maybe it's that.
I won't be alive past gamma.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that is changing, and so I think there's this idea that we've actually taken agency away from an entire generation of people, and I think that has to be put back in. So when we talk about indifference, which is what we talked about before, that people are indifferent because they don't think they have agency over their life. So if you don't have agency over your life, then you don't have free will.
And the government clearly doesn't want people to have agency over
Well,
themselves.
of course, yeah.
And people are self-medicating, so many young adult men, right, are smoking pot, drinking a lot, playing a lot of video games. They have these vices that they're controlling them.
Yeah, especially pornography.
Exactly. That one too. I was thinking it.
It's a huge epidemic.
Yeah.
It's an epidemic because the pornographers are not stupid. That's why they're rich. is they recognize that whoever, whether it's in freedom or in slavery, whoever engages the heart first as the person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's why beauty is so important in faith, because it engages the heart.
Definitely.
And that is why for young people, very young, we're talking children, the engagement of faith should be, at least in part, an engagement with beauty, because it conveys truth in a way that words don't. There's time in life to get the words, but the experiences, like I remember when I was a little boy, some of the experiences I had going in the old St. Simon Jew church, which was a wooden church. It was creaky, going through the place. But the smell of the wood, the smell of the place, I can still feel it. It gives me a sense of warmth, welcome, belonging. Is that strange? Just the smell.
Sure.
But I had that as a little boy. So in a sense, in this indifferent world, we can crack through it. I think beauty is the way to do it.
Yeah.
Is one powerful way to do it.
Yeah, because people will still travel all around the world to see Catholic churches.
Oh, yeah.
So there's something there. Like, that's not nothing. That is something.
Without doubt.
Yeah.
Right? Without doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I took a youth group trip many years ago up to Catamount, which is an outdoor zip lining place.
Oh, yeah.
We had a blast for 4 hours, and then we went, because it's like 20 miles from the Divine Mercy Shrine.
Oh, right.
So we stopped by there. And several parents came up afterwards and said, yeah, my kids loved the Divine Mercy Shrine more than the zip lining.
Without doubt.
Because they'd never seen that. And that I think is one of the most beautiful churches I've ever seen. I don't know. It's simple, small.
Yeah, it's
gorgeous.
very nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, it amazed me. Like,
Right. Remember, the most beautiful cathedrals and basilicas were built for an illiterate people who could not read the Gospels, the Scriptures, the Catechism, zip. But the experience of entering into the sacred space was the catechism. That's why stained glass should be in every sacred space, because it teaches.
yeah,
It teaches pictorially, symbolically, to that point.
it should be different. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've read the book Rebuilt.
Yes, I have, actually.
Rebuilt is this book from a priest down in Baltimore who did great work in his parish, and it's quite interesting. He it was like a dying parish, and he really brought it back, but he kind of brought it back by making it very similar to some of our Protestant evangelical churches, where they do contemporary music and they do, just a lot of, if you look at the church itself, it's just kind of like, looks like a conference hall. It's nothing special. And he really kind of rips into that. He's like, things like nice vestments and organ music, that's for church people. It's not to evangelize.
Wrong.
That I think is dead wrong in that
Wrong.
book. And every time I look at that, and I sometimes have seen their masses online, I'm like there's nothing that's elevating here. It's very much like you're in your living room listening to easy listening. Like a little Barry Manilow over there. I don't know.
No, I again, big tent.
Yeah. No, that's
Big tent.
definitely people.
There's a place for that, and it will help lift people in faith. But to say this other shouldn't be done, it's a false choice. It's a false choice in the end. We have to avoid it at all costs.
Sure.
I think on a practical level too, if the resurrection is real, which it is, then our lives have to be totally oriented for Christ, totally given over to him. So to your point, Bishop, I think it comes back to, what are we doing to actually live that sort of eternal mindset, that the only thing that matters on my deathbed is going to be, have I known, loved, and served the Lord? And if we live that, as young adults, especially going into family life, because I think we've lost the idea of the domestic church, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many distractions for young kids. We were just talking about pornography and how it is so readily available to children who are very, very young because of smartphones and all that. But, I'm just thinking about family life. And if the faith isn't just a thing that we do on Sunday, right? Which it needs to be, but, faith needs to be the center, the core of everyday life. And I think if parents live that well with their children, and just make it more than a side thing, an extra, that...
Right. St. John Vianney said, our faith must be around us as the air we breathe.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes a huge difference in just how you approach as a child the world, your friends, the culture, the lies that are constantly this crisis of identity. But if it's not lived at home, children are so impressionable, and then they become young adults who don't believe.
But I'm seeing some children lead their parents back to Christ.
There are for sure.
Seeing it more and more.
But it doesn't relieve the general responsibility of parents.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And if I may, it was Archbishop Sheen who said, if you do not live what you believe, you eventually believe how you live. Right?
Yeah.
So the number one issue for young parents is to be a witness to the faith. We've talked about this, right, with the pastors' meeting. My expectation of young adults who are marrying and having children is not that you teach the faith first and foremost, but that you witness to the faith by a life of virtue, that you pray with your children and come to Mass every Sunday with them for your own sake. If you do that, the church will do everything else. We'll partner with you to do everything else, teach the faith. But in the end, it's going back to the hypocrisy. If we don't live what we believe, you eventually believe how you live, and people are sensing, but what do you really believe then? So what is this message of this Christianity that you're talking about? The message of salvation in this Jesus, right? I'm sure you've talked about this, right? The whole role of apologetics. You know, the average young adult probably thinks science eventually is going to answer all the questions and we won't need religion anymore. Or that my body is just a receptacle for who I really am, which is my subjectivity, like the consciousness that they talk about, that they want to transfer to robots and stuff. It's crazy stuff. Or that in a universe that's 96 billion light years across, as the James Webb tells, right? And all of these anomalies that they can't explain. You want me to believe. You want me to believe. You people want me to believe that one event on the top of a relatively small hill has universal significance for all 96 billion light years across, which is exactly what we claim.
Yeah. It is a radical claim.
So they hear from a scientific point of view, and therefore we have to answer those questions. But there are answers to all those questions. Have answers in the faith. There's no doubt about it. But if we don't give them the answers and they don't raise the question, they're just going to go along with what secular society says. That's the frontier.
That's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
But the good news is we do know that Christ wins in the end.
Amen.
That he desires every man to be saved and come to the knowledge of truth. So that's our hope. So even, both the hopes and the challenges of our church, I think it's good to know the ending of the story. And that's what keeps us going.
And not only do we know it, but the father of evil knows it.
True.
So whatever he does, he knows he's done.
Yeah.
That should give us some consolation, no?
Last gasp of a failed, dying empire.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. So, Bishop, thank you again for being on 2 episodes here of Restless. I hope all of our listeners have enjoyed it. Please, continue living out your faith. Do not be afraid to live boldly as Catholics, to live confidently, knowing that Christ wins in the end, to really put into practice what we say we believe, that we can be the spark that does indeed lead so many souls to Christ and change the culture through sanctifying ourselves. You can find us on Veritas Catholic Network, 1350 AM and 103.9 FM, and wherever you get your podcasts. So tune in next time for more Restless.
Hey everybody, this is producer Matt. If you liked this week's episode of Restless and want to help the show grow, please rate us, review us, and subscribe on your preferred platform. God bless.